The rain hammered against the windows of the grand mansion as Senator Robert Harrison adjusted his silk tie one final time. Tonight was crucial for his political career. The annual charity gala would determine whether he secured the party's nomination for the upcoming presidential race. Downstairs, guests were already arriving, their expensive cars lining the circular driveway like jewels on display. But upstairs, in a room that most visitors never knew existed, 22-year-old Emma Harrison sat quietly by her window. She couldn't see the arriving guests, but she could hear their laughter echoing through the halls below. Born blind, Emma had learned to navigate the world through sounds, touch, and intuition. Her father had kept her hidden from public view for years, claiming it was for her protection, but Emma suspected there were deeper reasons. The Harrison family had built their reputation on strength and perfection. Senator Harrison's public image was carefully crafted around traditional values and unwavering leadership. A disabled daughter didn't fit into that narrative, so Emma remained the family's best-kept secret. She had private tutors, personal caregivers, and everything money could buy except freedom and genuine human connection. Emma's mother had died when she was 8, and since then, her father had become increasingly distant. He would visit her, room briefly during his rare moments at home, offering awkward conversation and expensive gifts that meant nothing to her. What Emma truly wanted was to be part of the world beyond her bedroom walls, to attend university, to have friends, to experience life like any other young woman her age. Dr. Marcus Reed had been working as a private physician for wealthy families in the city for over 15 years. He was known for his discretion and excellent medical care, which made him the perfect choice for families who valued privacy above all else. When Senator Harrison contacted him about providing ongoing care for his daughter, Dr. Reed assumed it would be routine work. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Senator Harrison's assistant, a stern woman named Mrs. Patterson, explained that Emma needed regular checkups and that complete confidentiality was essential. No medical records were to be shared with anyone, and Dr. Reed would be required to sign additional privacy agreements beyond the standard doctor-patient confidentiality. Dr. Reed found the level of secrecy unusual but not unprecedented among his wealthy clients. Many prominent families preferred to keep their medical affairs private, especially when dealing with sensitive health issues. He agreed to the terms and scheduled his first visit for the following Thursday. The Harrison mansion impressed Dr. Reed with its grandeur, but something felt off about the atmosphere. The staff moved quietly through the halls, speaking in hushed tones as if afraid of being overheard. Mrs. Patterson led him through several corridors and up a grand staircase before stopping at a heavy wooden door at the end of a long hallway. When Dr. Reed entered Emma's room, he was struck by how isolated it felt despite its luxury. The room was beautifully decorated with expensive furniture and artwork, but it felt more like a gilded cage than a young woman's bedroom. Emma sat in a chair by the window, her unseeing eyes directed toward the glass, as if she could will herself to see the world beyond. Their first meeting was formal and brief. Emma answered his medical questions politely but without enthusiasm. She seemed resigned to these visits, treating them as just another part of her confined routine. Dr. Reed conducted a thorough examination and found Emma to be in excellent physical health despite her sedentary lifestyle. As he prepared to leave, Dr. Reed noticed something that troubled him. Emma's medical chart, provided by Mrs. Patterson, contained remarkably little information for someone who had supposedly required extensive medical care over the years. There were no records of specialists, no documentation of treatments for her blindness, and no indication that anyone had ever explored potential interventions that might improve her quality of life. Over the next few months, Dr. Reed's visits became regular. Emma gradually began to open up during their conversations, revealing an intelligent and articulate young woman who was starving for meaningful human interaction. She spoke about books she listened to, music that moved her, and dreams she harbored, of someday attending college or traveling. Dr. Reed began to realize that Emma's isolation wasn't medically necessary. While her blindness was permanent, there was no reason she couldn't live a much more independent and fulfilling life. She was capable of learning mobility skills, using assistive technology, and engaging with the world in countless ways. The more he learned about her situation, the more troubled he became. One evening, after a particularly lengthy conversation with Emma about her desire to learn Braille and use a computer with screen reading software, Dr. Reed made a decision that would change everything. He began researching Senator Harrison's public statements and policies, looking for clues about why he would keep his daughter hidden away. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Senator Harrison had built much of his political platform on opposing disability rights legislation, arguing that resources should be focused on productive members of society, rather than those who cannot contribute meaningfully to the economy. He had voted against funding for accessibility improvements, opposed inclusive education initiatives, and publicly stated that families should handle their own burdens without expecting government assistance. The hypocrisy was staggering. Here was a man who had hidden his own disabled daughter while publicly arguing that people with disabilities were somehow less valuable to society. Emma wasn't a burden to be hidden away. She was an intelligent, capable young woman who had been denied the opportunity to prove her worth. Dr. Reed realized he was facing an ethical dilemma that went far beyond medical care. Emma was essentially a prisoner in her own home, kept hidden to protect her father's political ambitions. She had the right to make her own choices about her life, but she had been systematically denied information about her options and the resources available to help her live independently. The weight of this secret pressed down on Dr. Reed as he left the Harrison mansion that evening. He understood that exposing the truth could destroy Senator Harrison's career, but continuing to remain silent felt like becoming complicit in Emma's imprisonment. The decision he made in the coming days would not only change Emma's life forever, but would also shake the foundations of one of the country's most powerful political families. Dr. Reed spent sleepless nights wrestling with his conscience. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's face, heard her voice asking questions about the world she was forbidden to join. The young woman's intelligence and spirit were undeniable, yet she remained trapped by circumstances beyond her control and her father's political calculations. During his next visit, Emma seemed different. There was a restlessness in her manner, a sense that something was stirring within her. She had been listening to news broadcasts on a small radio she kept hidden in her drawer, learning about current events and political discussions. For the first time in years, she was connecting with the world beyond her walls, even if only through sound waves. "Dr. Reed," Emma said during one of their conversations, "I've been thinking about something. I hear my father on the television sometimes, talking about policies and laws. Some of the things he says about people with disabilities, they don't sound very kind." Dr. Reed felt his heart race. Emma was beginning to piece together the contradiction between her father's public persona and private actions. He chose his words carefully, not wanting to influence her but also refusing to lie. "What do you think about what you've heard?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I think he's ashamed of me. That's why I'm kept up here, isn't it? It's not for my protection at all." Her voice carried a mixture of sadness and growing anger. "I'm his secret because having a blind daughter doesn't fit with his political image." The truth hung in the air between them like a heavy curtain. Dr. Reed realized that Emma was far more aware of her situation than anyone had given her credit for. Her blindness had never affected her ability to think, to analyze, or to understand the complex dynamics of her family. "Emma," Dr. Reed said gently, "what do you know about the resources available to help people with visual impairments live independently?" Her laugh was bitter. "Nothing. I've asked Mrs. Patterson and the other staff members about schools, about technology, about programs that might help me. But they always say my father thinks it's too dangerous for me to leave the house. They say I should be grateful for the comfortable life I have here." Dr. Reed made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Would you like to learn about those resources? Would you like to know what options you might have?" Emma's entire posture changed. She sat up straighter, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. "Yes. More than anything in the world, yes." Over the next several weeks, Dr. Reed began bringing Emma information that opened up entirely new worlds for her. He described assistive technologies that could help her navigate independently, told her about universities with excellent disability services, and explained how many successful professionals were blind or visually impaired. Emma absorbed every piece of information like someone dying of thirst finally finding water. She learned about screen reading software that could help her use computers, mobility training that could teach her to travel safely, and organizations dedicated to helping people with visual impairments achieve their goals. But the more Emma learned, the more she understood how much had been kept from her. She realized that her father had deliberately isolated her not just from the public eye, but from any possibility of independence. Every professional who could have helped her had been kept away. Every resource that might have empowered her had been hidden. One afternoon, Emma made a request that Dr. Reed had been both hoping for and dreading. "I want to learn to use a computer. I want to access the internet and learn about the world for myself. Can you help me get the equipment I need?" Dr. Reed knew that fulfilling this request would cross a line. Senator Harrison had specifically forbidden any technology that might connect Emma to the outside world. But looking at the young woman's determined face, he realized he couldn't continue to be complicit in her imprisonment. He began smuggling in a laptop computer during his medical visits, along with screen reading software and tutorials. Emma proved to be remarkably quick at learning the technology, her sharp mind adapting rapidly to new ways of accessing information. The day Emma first successfully navigated a website and read a news article independently was transformative for both of them. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the vast world of information and connection that had been denied to her for so long. "Dr. Reed," she whispered, "I can read about anything I want. I can learn about universities, about careers, about places I might want to visit someday. Why was this kept from me?" The question hung between them, and Dr. Reed knew he could no longer avoid the complete truth. He began to explain the full extent of her father's hypocrisy, describing the senator's voting record on disability issues, and his public statements that directly contradicted the care and consideration he should have been showing his own daughter. Emma listened in growing shock and anger as Dr. Reed revealed how her father had voted against funding for programs that could have helped thousands of people like her, while simultaneously keeping her hidden to protect his political reputation. "He's built his career on the idea that people with disabilities are somehow less valuable," Emma said, her voice shaking with emotion. "And all this time, he's had a daughter with a disability that he's been too ashamed to acknowledge." The weight of this revelation settled over Emma like a heavy blanket. She had always known her father was distant and controlling, but she had never understood the full scope of his betrayal. Not only had he denied her the chance at independence, but he had actively worked against policies that could have helped others in similar situations. Dr. Reed watched as Emma processed this information, seeing the young woman he had come to care about grapple with the realization that her entire life had been shaped by her father's political ambitions rather than genuine concern for her well-being. "What can I do?" Emma asked finally. "How can I change this situation?" The question marked a turning point. Emma was no longer the resigned, passive young woman Dr. Reed had first met. She was becoming someone determined to take control of her own life, regardless of the consequences. Dr. Reed realized that he was no longer just Emma's doctor. He had become her ally in a fight against a system that had kept her captive for over 2 decades. The battle for Emma's freedom was about to begin, and neither of them fully understood the forces they would be up against or the price they would have to pay for challenging one of the most powerful political figures in the country. Emma's transformation over the following weeks was remarkable. Armed with internet access and screen-reading software, she began researching everything she had been denied. She read about disability rights advocacy, learned about successful people who were blind, and discovered organizations fighting for the very legislation her father opposed. During one of their sessions, Emma made a discovery that shook her to her core. While researching her father's voting record, she found a transcript of a speech he had given just 3 months earlier to a conservative think tank. The resources of this great nation should not be squandered on those who cannot contribute productively to society, Senator Harrison had declared to thunderous applause. "While we must show compassion, we cannot allow sentiment to override fiscal responsibility. Some individuals, through no fault of their own, will always require care rather than being capable of meaningful independence." Emma's hands trembled as she listened to her father's words through her screen reader. He wasn't just opposing disability rights in abstract political terms. He was describing her. In his worldview, she was someone incapable of meaningful independence, someone who would always require care. "He doesn't even know who I am," Emma told Dr. Reed, her voice filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "He's made assumptions about what I can and cannot do without ever giving me the chance to prove him wrong." Dr. Reed watched as Emma's anger transformed into something more powerful: resolve. She began spending every available moment learning and growing, as if she were trying to make up for more than 2 decades of lost time. She taught herself advanced computer skills, began learning multiple languages through online programs, and even started taking college-level courses through distance learning platforms. The change in Emma was impossible to hide completely. Mrs. Patterson noticed that she seemed more confident during meals, asking more questions about current events and showing interest in topics she had never discussed before. The household staff began to whisper among themselves about the young woman who seemed to be awakening from a long sleep. Senator Harrison, however, remained largely oblivious to the changes in his daughter. His campaign for the presidential nomination was intensifying, requiring him to travel extensively and attend countless fundraising events. When he was home, his interactions with Emma remained brief and superficial, more obligation than genuine connection. But Emma was no longer content to accept these token visits. During one of her father's rare appearances in her room, she decided to test the waters. "Father," she said as he prepared to leave after their usual 5-minute conversation, "I've been reading about some interesting programs for people with visual impairments. There are universities with excellent support services, and I've learned about technology that could help me." "Emma," Senator Harrison interrupted, his voice carrying the tone he used when discussing unpleasant but necessary political compromises. "We've discussed this before. The world outside this house is dangerous and unpredictable. You have everything you need here. There's no reason to complicate your life with unrealistic expectations." "But Father, I've been learning about people who are blind and have successful careers, who travel independently, who—" "Enough." His voice was sharp now, carrying an edge of anger that Emma had rarely heard directed at her. "I don't know where you're getting these ideas, but they're not practical. You're safe here, cared for, and provided with everything necessary for a comfortable life. Many people would be grateful for such circumstances." After he left, Emma sat in stunned silence. Her father hadn't just dismissed her hopes. He had refused to even consider them. The conversation confirmed what she had begun to suspect. Her confinement wasn't about her limitations, but about his need to control the narrative of their family. Dr. Reed found Emma in tears during his next visit. Through her sobs, she recounted the conversation with her father, and her growing realization that he would never willingly allow her to pursue independence. "He doesn't see me as a person capable of making decisions about my own life," Emma said. "To him, I'm just a problem to be managed, a secret to be kept hidden." Dr. Reed sat quietly as Emma worked through her emotions, understanding that she was grieving not just for the opportunities she had been denied, but for the relationship with her father that she now realized had never truly existed. "Emma," Dr. Reed said gently, "what do you want to do about this situation?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a strength that surprised them both. "I want to leave. I want to go to university, learn to live independently, and show the world that people with disabilities are capable of far more than my father believes." The simple statement hung in the air like a declaration of war. Dr. Reed understood the enormous challenges they would face. Emma was legally an adult, but she had no identification documents, no financial resources of her own, and no practical experience navigating the world outside her father's mansion. "It won't be easy," Dr. Reed warned. "Your father has considerable power and resources. He won't allow you to leave quietly." "I know," Emma replied, "but I can't spend the rest of my life as a prisoner in a golden cage. I've learned too much about what's possible to go back to accepting this isolation." They began planning Emma's escape with the careful precision of a military operation. Dr. Reed contacted organizations that assisted adults leaving difficult family situations, researched legal resources that could help Emma establish her independence, and quietly gathered information about universities with strong disability support programs. The most challenging aspect was ensuring Emma would have the resources she needed to survive independently. Her father had never allowed her to have her own bank account or any form of personal identification. She would need to establish a legal identity separate from her family's control. As they developed their plans, both Emma and Dr. Reed understood that their actions would have consequences that extended far beyond Emma's personal freedom. If their efforts succeeded, it would expose Senator Harrison's hypocrisy and potentially destroy his political career. The man who had built his reputation on traditional values and strong family leadership would be revealed as someone who had kept his own daughter imprisoned to protect his image. Emma grappled with the implications of what they were planning. Despite everything, Senator Harrison was still her father, and she understood that her actions might destroy him. But she also understood that her continued silence would mean accepting a life of captivity while her father actively worked to deny others the rights and opportunities she desperately wanted for herself. "I can't save him from the consequences of his own choices," Emma told Dr. Reed one afternoon. "But I can save myself, and maybe my story will help others who are in similar situations." The decision was made. Emma would leave her father's house and claim her right to independence, regardless of the political and personal chaos that might follow. The young woman who had spent over 2 decades hidden in the shadows was preparing to step into the light, and neither she nor Dr. Reed fully understood how dramatically their actions would reshape everything they thought they knew about power, family, and the price of truth. The plan they developed was both simple and terrifying. Dr. Reed had contacted a disability rights organization that specialized in helping adults escape controlling family situations. The organization, called Freedom Path, had experience with cases involving wealthy families who used their resources to maintain control over disabled adult children. Sarah Martinez, Freedom Path's lead advocate, agreed to meet with Dr. Reed at a coffee shop across town. A former social worker with 15 years of experience, Sarah had seen cases like Emma's before, though rarely involving such prominent political figures. "The challenge isn't just helping Emma establish independence," Sarah explained over coffee. "It's protecting her from retaliation. When powerful families lose control over a family member they've kept hidden, they often respond aggressively. They have resources to make life very difficult for anyone who helps." Dr. Reed understood the risks, but seeing Emma's transformation over the past months had convinced him that action was necessary. "She's not just capable of independence," he told Sarah. "She's extraordinary. Given the chance, she could accomplish anything." Sarah agreed to take on Emma's case, but she insisted on meeting with Emma directly before proceeding. The challenge was arranging a meeting without alerting the Harrison household staff or security systems. Dr. Reed proposed a solution that was risky, but feasible. During his regular medical visit, he would create a minor medical emergency that would require Emma to be taken to the hospital. Once there, Sarah could meet with her privately, while Dr. Reed handled the fabricated medical situation. The plan was set for a Thursday afternoon when Senator Harrison would be in Washington for crucial campaign meetings. Dr. Reed arrived for his regular visit, conducting a normal examination before implementing their strategy. "Emma," he said loudly enough for Mrs. Patterson to hear through the door, "I'm concerned about your blood pressure readings. I think we need to have you checked at the hospital immediately." Mrs. Patterson, who had been instructed to defer to Dr. Reed's medical judgment in all situations, quickly arranged for Emma to be transported to Metropolitan General Hospital. The ride was Emma's first time outside the Harrison mansion in over 3 years. At the hospital, while Dr. Reed ran unnecessary but harmless tests, Sarah Martinez met with Emma in a private consultation room. The meeting between the two women was electric with possibility and determination. "Emma," Sarah said, "I want you to understand exactly what you're choosing. Leaving your father's house means giving up financial security, comfortable living conditions, and family support. You'll need to build an entirely new life from nothing. Are you prepared for that challenge?" Emma's response was immediate and unwavering. I've been living in a beautiful prison for 22 years. I'd rather struggle in freedom than continue existing in comfortable captivity. Sarah outlined the practical steps Emma would need to take. First, they would help her obtain official identification documents and establish a separate legal identity. Then, they would connect her with transitional housing specifically designed for disabled adults seeking independence. Finally, they would help her navigate university applications and financial aid processes. There's something else you need to consider, Sarah said carefully. Your story, if it becomes public, could have significant political implications. Your father's career could be destroyed by the revelation that he's kept a disabled daughter hidden while publicly opposing disability rights. Emma had wrestled with this reality for weeks. I understand that my actions might hurt him politically, but his actions have hurt me personally for over 2 decades. I can't sacrifice my life to protect his career. They agreed on a timeline. Emma would leave the Harrison mansion in 1 week, during her father's next extended campaign trip. Dr. Reed would help her gather essential personal belongings, and Sarah would have temporary housing and legal support ready. The week that followed was the longest of Emma's life. She continued her routine, interacting normally with the household staff while secretly preparing for the most dramatic change imaginable. She memorized Sarah's contact information, practiced using mobility techniques Dr. Reed had taught her, and mentally prepared herself for a future she could barely imagine. Dr. Reed found himself questioning his decision dozens of times each day. He was essentially destroying his professional relationship with one of his most prominent clients and potentially exposing himself to legal retaliation. But every time he saw Emma's determination and growing confidence, he knew they were making the right choice. Senator Harrison, meanwhile, remained focused on his campaign. The latest polls showed him gaining ground against his primary opponents, and political analysts were beginning to discuss him as the likely party nominee. His public appearances emphasized his commitment to traditional family values and fiscal responsibility, including his opposition to what he called excessive government spending on social programs. The irony wasn't lost on Emma. While her father campaigned on a platform that essentially argued people like her were burdens on society, she was preparing to prove him spectacularly wrong. The night before her planned departure, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of the house where she had spent her entire life, understanding that by the next evening, she would be in a completely different world. She thought about her mother, who had died when Emma was 8. She wondered what her mother would have thought about her father's decision to hide her away, whether she would have supported Emma's choice to seek independence. Dr. Reed arrived the next morning for what would be their final medical visit in the Harrison mansion. Emma had packed a small bag with essential items, hiding it under her bed where the household staff wouldn't notice it during their routine cleaning. "Are you ready?" Dr. Reed asked quietly. Emma nodded, though her hands were trembling slightly. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." They had timed the departure carefully. Mrs. Patterson was running errands, the household staff was busy with other duties, and Senator Harrison was 300 miles away at a campaign rally. Dr. Reed would simply walk out of the house with Emma, claiming they were going to the hospital for tests. As they prepared to leave, Emma took one final look around the room that had been both her sanctuary and her prison. She had loved and hated this space in equal measure, but she knew she would never return to it as the same person who was leaving. "Dr. Reed," Emma said as they walked toward the door, "whatever happens after this, thank you for helping me understand that I had choices." He smiled, though his heart was racing with anxiety about what they were about to do. "Emma, thank you for reminding me why I became a doctor in the first place. It wasn't to enable comfortable captivity. It was to help people live their best possible lives." They walked out of the Harrison mansion together, Emma's hand on Dr. Reed's arm as she navigated the front steps she hadn't descended in years. Behind them, the door closed on the only life Emma had ever known. Ahead of them lay uncertainty, challenge, and the promise of freedom. Emma's first night of freedom was spent in a small but comfortable apartment operated by Freedom Path. The space was designed specifically for adults transitioning to independence after leaving controlling family situations. It had tactile markers throughout to help Emma navigate safely, and all the assistive technology she would need to manage daily tasks independently. Sarah Martinez stayed with Emma through that first evening, helping her adjust to the overwhelming reality of being completely free to make her own decisions for the first time in her life. Emma alternated between excitement and terror, thrilled by her newfound autonomy but frightened by the enormous responsibility that came with it. "It's normal to feel overwhelmed," Sarah assured her as they sat together in the small living room. "You're processing 22 years of suppressed independence all at once. Take it one day at a time." Meanwhile, the Harrison household was in chaos. Mrs. Patterson had returned from her errands to find Emma's room empty, with no explanation from the staff about where she had gone. Dr. Reed wasn't answering his phone, and Emma's belongings suggested she hadn't planned to return. Senator Harrison was in the middle of a campaign speech when his chief of staff received the frantic call from Mrs. Patterson. The senator finished his remarks, smiled for photographs, and shook hands with supporters, all while his mind raced with the implications of Emma's disappearance. During the flight back to his home state, Senator Harrison's political instincts took over. His first concern wasn't Emma's well-being, but the potential damage to his campaign if her existence became public knowledge. He immediately called his personal attorney and his campaign manager, instructing them to prepare for a potential crisis. "We need to find her quickly and quietly," he told his team during an emergency conference call. "If this becomes public, it could destroy everything we've worked for." Dr. Reed, meanwhile, was experiencing his own crisis of conscience. He had helped Emma escape, but he understood that Senator Harrison would use every resource at his disposal to find her and bring her back. The doctor had essentially declared war on one of the most powerful political figures in the country. Emma's second day of freedom brought her first real test. Sarah had arranged for her to meet with representatives from the State University's Disability Services Office. Emma would need to complete her high school equivalency requirements and apply for admission, but the university was willing to work with her unusual circumstances. The meeting took place in the university's Accessibility Center, a building Emma had never imagined she would be allowed to enter. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the director of Disability Services, was immediately impressed by Emma's intelligence and determination. "Your academic potential is obvious," Dr. Walsh told Emma after reviewing the informal transcripts Dr. Reed had prepared based on Emma's self-directed learning. "With some intensive preparation, I believe you could be ready to begin college courses within a year." Emma felt tears streaming down her face as Dr. Walsh described the support services available to students with visual impairments. Everything her father had told her was impossible was not only possible but routinely provided to students who needed accommodation. While Emma was discovering the possibilities that awaited her, Senator Harrison's team was working frantically to locate her. They had traced Dr. Reed's involvement and were pressuring him to reveal Emma's whereabouts. Harrison's attorney had already sent Dr. Reed a letter threatening legal action for kidnapping and unlawful interference with family relationships. Dr. Reed met with his own attorney, explaining the situation and preparing for the legal battle he knew was coming. "The challenge," his lawyer explained, "is that while Emma is legally an adult, her father will argue that her disability makes her vulnerable to exploitation, and that you took advantage of her condition." The legal strategy became clear quickly. Senator Harrison would portray Emma as a vulnerable disabled woman who had been manipulated by an unscrupulous doctor with unknown motives. He would claim that Dr. Reed had filled Emma's head with unrealistic expectations and convinced her to abandon the safety and security of her family. But Emma was already proving that narrative false. Within her first week of independence, she had mastered public transportation routes, learned to shop for groceries independently, and begun developing the daily living skills she would need for long-term success. More importantly, she had started connecting with other blind and visually impaired individuals through support groups and online communities. For the first time in her life, Emma was meeting people who understood her experience and could offer practical advice about navigating the world without sight. The breakthrough came during Emma's second week of freedom. A reporter named Jessica Chen, who specialized in investigative stories about political hypocrisy, received an anonymous tip about Senator Harrison's hidden daughter. The source provided just enough information to spark Chen's curiosity without revealing Emma's location or current situation. Chen began researching Senator Harrison's family background, discovering the curious absence of any mention of children in his official biography, despite marriage records indicating he had been married for over 25 years before his wife's death. Public records showed property taxes on a large mansion, but no information about family members besides the senator himself. As Chen dug deeper, she found the connection to Dr. Reed through medical licensing records and insurance claims. The pattern of regular house calls to the Harrison residence over several years suggested ongoing care for someone in the household. Meanwhile, Emma was facing her own moment of truth. Sarah Martinez had explained that her story would likely become public eventually. Given her father's prominence and the resources he was dedicating to finding her, Emma would need to decide whether to speak publicly about her experience or try to maintain her privacy while building her new life. "If I stay silent," Emma told Sarah during one of their counseling sessions, "my father's version of events will become the official story. He'll portray me as a confused, disabled woman who was manipulated into leaving home. But if I speak publicly, I'll be exposing private family matters and potentially destroying his career." Sarah helped Emma understand that she wasn't responsible for the consequences of her father's choices. "You have the right to tell your own story," Sarah explained. "Your father made the decision to hide you away and build his career on policies that would harm people like you. The consequences of that hypocrisy are his responsibility, not yours." Emma made her decision on a quiet Sunday morning 2 weeks after leaving her father's house. She would tell her story publicly, not for revenge but to demonstrate that people with disabilities were capable of far more than politicians like her father believed. She contacted Jessica Chen through Freedom Path's legal team, agreeing to an exclusive interview that would reveal the truth about Senator Harrison's hidden daughter and challenge everything the public thought they knew about the man who might become their next president. The interview was scheduled for the following week, giving Emma time to prepare for the moment when she would step fully into the light and claim her place in the world her father had tried to deny her. The young woman who had spent over 2 decades in the shadows was about to show the world that she was not only capable of independence, but determined to use her voice to advocate for others who had been silenced by shame and political expediency. The interview took place in Freedom Path's conference room on a crisp autumn morning. Jessica Chen arrived early, setting up recording equipment and reviewing her notes one final time. She had spent weeks preparing for this conversation, understanding that Emma's story could reshape the entire presidential campaign. Emma entered the room with quiet confidence, her posture straight and her expression determined. 3 weeks of independence had already changed her dramatically. The resigned, isolated young woman Dr. Reed had first met was gone, replaced by someone who radiated strength and purpose. "Emma," Jessica began gently, "I want you to tell me about your life in your own words. Start wherever feels right to you." Emma's voice was steady as she began to speak. "I spent 22 years believing that I was a burden, that my blindness made me incapable of contributing anything meaningful to the world. My father kept me isolated in our house, telling me it was for my own protection, but I now understand it was for his protection. I was hidden away because my existence contradicted the political image he wanted to project." For the next 2 hours, Emma detailed her life of isolation, the discovery of her father's public statements about disability, and her journey toward independence. She spoke about Dr. Reed's role in opening her eyes to possibilities she had never known existed, and about the organizations and individuals who had helped her claim her freedom. Jessica Chen was struck by Emma's articulate intelligence and her lack of bitterness despite the years of confinement. "What do you want people to understand about your experience?" she asked. "I want them to understand that people with disabilities are not burdens to be hidden away or problems to be managed," Emma replied. "We are individuals with dreams, capabilities, and the right to make our own choices about our lives. My father's policies would deny others the very opportunities I'm now fighting to claim for myself." The interview concluded with Emma's vision for her future. She planned to complete her education, pursue a career in disability advocacy, and work to change the attitudes and policies that kept others in situations similar to what she had endured. Jessica prepared to leave. Emma made one final request. When you publish this story, please don't focus on destroying my father. Focus on the possibility of change. Focus on what people with disabilities can accomplish when given the chance. Senator Harrison's campaign staff learned about the impending story 3 days before publication. The senator's initial reaction was rage, followed quickly by panic, as his advisors explained the devastating implications for his presidential ambitions. Emergency strategy sessions continued through the night as Harrison's team desperately sought ways to minimize the damage. They considered challenging Emma's mental competency, claiming she had been brainwashed or arguing that her story was fabricated by political enemies. But as the details of the story emerged, it became clear that no spin strategy could overcome the fundamental contradiction at the heart of Harrison's political career. He had built his reputation on opposing support for people with disabilities while simultaneously hiding his own disabled daughter. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, with the headline "Hidden in Plain Sight: Presidential Candidate's Secret Daughter Challenges His Disability Policies." The article detailed Emma's story with sensitivity and power, contrasting her capabilities and aspirations with her father's public statements about people with disabilities. The political reaction was swift and devastating. Harrison's primary opponents immediately seized on the story, questioning his honesty and integrity. Disability rights organizations called for him to withdraw from the race. Editorial boards across the country published scathing criticisms of his hypocrisy, but perhaps the most powerful response came from ordinary people with disabilities who saw Emma's story as validation of their own struggles against societal prejudice and family shame. Social media filled with messages of support for Emma and condemnation of politicians who viewed disability as something to be hidden. Senator Harrison held a press conference 48 hours after the story broke. Standing behind a podium in his campaign headquarters, he looked older and more defeated than he had ever appeared in public. "I want to address the recent reports about my family," he began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "I have made serious errors in judgment regarding my daughter Emma. I believed I was protecting her, but I now understand that my actions were motivated more by my own fears and political calculations than by her best interests." The statement was carefully crafted by his legal team, but it felt hollow to most listeners. Harrison announced that he was suspending his presidential campaign to focus on repairing the relationship with my daughter and reevaluating my positions on issues affecting the disability community. Emma watched her father's press conference from her apartment, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. She had never wanted to destroy him, but she understood that his political downfall was the inevitable consequence of choices he had made, long before she decided to seek her freedom. Dr. Reed, who had been facing intense legal pressure from Harrison's attorneys, found himself suddenly vindicated as public opinion shifted strongly in favor of Emma's right to independence. Medical ethics boards that had been investigating his conduct concluded that he had acted appropriately in helping an adult patient access information and resources for independent living. In the months that followed, Emma's life transformed in ways she had never imagined possible. She enrolled in university courses, became a sought-after speaker on disability rights issues, and began working with organizations to help other disabled adults escape controlling family situations. The most profound change, however, was personal. Emma discovered that she was not only capable of independence but genuinely gifted as an advocate and educator. Her intelligence, combined with her unique perspective on disability and family dynamics, made her a powerful voice for change. 1 year after leaving her father's house, Emma received an unexpected phone call. Senator Harrison, who had remained largely out of public view since withdrawing from the presidential race, asked if he could meet with her. They met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop where Emma now often studied. Harrison looked older and humbler than she remembered, the weight of his choices clearly visible in his posture and expression. "Emma," he said quietly, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was, not just about hiding you away, but about my entire approach to disability policy. Watching what you've accomplished this year has shown me how blind I was to the potential of people I dismissed as unable to contribute. Emma listened as her father apologized for the years of isolation and control, acknowledging that his treatment of her had been driven by shame and political ambition, rather than genuine concern for her well-being. "I can't undo the past," Harrison continued, "but I want to support your work now. I want to use whatever influence I have left to advocate for the policies I once opposed." Emma considered his words carefully. The relationship between them would never be what it might have been if he had supported her from the beginning, but she understood the value of forgiveness both for his sake and for her own healing. "I appreciate your apology," Emma said finally, "and I think your voice, as someone who was wrong about these issues, could be powerful in changing other minds. But any relationship we build going forward has to be based on respect for my independence and my right to make my own choices." Harrison nodded, understanding that he was being offered a chance at redemption, but only on Emma's terms. It was more than he had dared hope for, and far less than he deserved. Emma's story became a catalyst for broader changes in how society viewed disability and family dynamics. Her advocacy work led to new legislation protecting disabled adults from family control, and her example inspired countless others to seek independence despite familial or societal obstacles. The young woman who had once been hidden in the shadows of power had not only claimed her place in the light, but had become a beacon for others seeking their own path to freedom and dignity. Her journey from captivity to independence proved that the greatest limitations are often not physical disabilities, but the prejudices and fears of those who claim to protect us. Emma Harrison had discovered that true strength comes not from hiding our differences, but from embracing them and using our unique perspectives to create positive change in the world. Her story reminded everyone that behind every political position are real people whose lives are affected by the choices of those in power, and that sometimes the most profound political acts are simply the courage to live authentically and claim the rights that should belong to every human being.